The sun was slowly sinking behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The air smelled faintly of dry grass and fresh earth, and the quiet hum of nature was all that could be heard around the vast expanse of the ranch. Sarah had been walking for hours, her shoes dusty, her clothes worn from traveling under the scorching sun. She had no clear destination, only a desperate need to find help. Her heart raced, and every step she took seemed heavier than the last. In the distance, she saw a cluster of buildings, the ranch. A small glimmer of hope flickered in her chest. Perhaps here she could find someone who could help. As she approached, the sound of horses softly neighing reached her ears. The ranch looked peaceful, almost serene, but Sarah's mind was consumed with worry. The horse she had found was not just injured, it was on the edge of danger, standing perilously near a steep cliff. She had tried everything she could to help it, but her efforts were in vain. She needed someone strong, experienced, someone who knew animals better than she did. And now, here she was, at the ranch, hoping that the stories she had heard about the owner were true. The main ranch house was simple but sturdy, built of aged wood with a porch that stretched across the front. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, hinting at a warm fire inside. Sarah knocked on the door, her hands trembling. When it opened, she was met with the sight of a tall man, his face weathered by years of sun and wind, his eyes calm but assessing. He was the rancher she had heard about, a man known for his experience with horses and his careful, methodical nature. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady but curious. Sarah's words tumbled out in a rush. Please, I need your help. There's a horse, an injured horse just outside the cliff. It's in danger. I don't know what to do." Her voice shook, and her hands gestured wildly as she tried to explain. The rancher looked at her carefully. He had seen worry and fear many times before, but there was something different in her eyes. It was raw, urgent, a kind of desperation that made him pause. He stepped aside, letting her in. The interior of the house smelled of wood polish, leather, and hay, a comforting mixture for anyone who spent their life around animals. "I can take a look," he said slowly, "but helping a horse on that cliff is not simple. It's dangerous, and it's not something I do lightly." "I'll pay anything," Sarah exclaimed, clutching her small purse. "Please, just do it quickly. I can't bear to see it suffer." Her voice cracked, and she looked at him with pleading eyes. The rancher studied her for a moment. He had always been cautious, always measured in his actions, but something about the urgency in her tone, the genuine concern in her eyes, stirred a sense of responsibility. He sighed. "It won't be easy," he said, "but if you insist, I'll help. There's just one thing you'll have to give me a token for my time. $1. Sarah blinked, surprised. $1? It was such a small amount for what she was asking, but she nodded immediately, digging into her purse and handing it to him. "Here, please. Just please help it." The rancher accepted the dollar with a faint smile, as if the money were almost symbolic. He knew that what he was about to do was more than just a simple task. It was a test of courage, patience, and skill. He put on his worn hat, grabbed the reins of his horse, and led it toward the open fields. Sarah followed, trying to keep pace. As they neared the cliff, the landscape changed. The flat, open ranch turned into rocky, uneven terrain. The grass grew sparse, and the ground was unstable in places. At the edge, the horse she had found was visible, trembling, its leg bent unnaturally. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. She could see the pain in the animal's eyes, the fear of falling, the helplessness that made her own heart ache. The rancher dismounted, approaching the injured horse slowly. He spoke in soft, low tones, as if trying to calm it with words it could somehow understand. Sarah watched in awe as he moved with a careful grace, every step calculated, every motion deliberate. This was no ordinary man. This was someone who had spent a lifetime understanding animals, someone who could sense their fear and act accordingly. Sarah's own hands shook as she wanted to do more, to somehow ease the horse's suffering. She knelt a few feet away, murmuring encouragement, her voice gentle. She noticed small details, the horse's flaring nostrils, the way it shifted its weight, the faint whimper it made. Her heart ached for it, and for a moment, she felt utterly helpless. The rancher glanced at her, nodding reassuringly. "Stay back," he said calmly. "I've got this. It's going to be all right." His confidence, quiet but firm, gave Sarah a sliver of hope. She knew that without him, the horse would have no chance. Hours seemed to pass in minutes as the rancher examined the terrain, the position of the horse, and the safest way to approach. Every move was deliberate, every decision crucial. The wind picked up, rustling the grass and carrying a faint chill. Sarah could see the strain on his face, the tension in his muscles, yet he moved forward with determination. Sarah couldn't stop her mind from racing. What if he slipped? What if the horse panicked? What if they both ended up in danger? But even as fear gripped her, she also felt something else, a deep respect for the man who had chosen to face the risk. A sense of awe at the quiet courage it took to act when so many would have turned away. Finally, he reached the horse, kneeling close, his hands gentle as he inspected the injury. Sarah held her breath, praying silently. The rancher worked slowly, talking to the horse in soft tones, soothing it with a calm presence. The hours of worry, the desperate search for help, and the anxiety of seeing the horse in peril all seemed to converge in this single moment. Sarah realized, with a strange mixture of relief and admiration, that sometimes help came in unexpected forms. Sometimes, it came from strangers who were willing to risk everything for someone or something they had never met before. And in that moment, she understood that courage wasn't just about daring feats. It was about quiet determination, patience, and a willingness to do what others might consider unthinkable. The sun continued its slow descent, casting long shadows across the cliff and the ranch. The first part of their journey had ended, but the real challenge was only beginning. Sarah knew that the next steps would require more than hope. They would require trust, bravery, and the remarkable skill of a man who had chosen to act when most would have walked away. And as she watched him prepare, she whispered a silent promise to herself. No matter what happened next, she would do everything in her power to ensure that the injured horse survived. She would not forget this moment, this lesson in courage, and the man who had turned a simple dollar into an act that might just change the life of a frightened animal forever. The wind had picked up as the rancher led his horse toward the edge of the cliff. Sarah followed cautiously, careful not to step on the loose stones or uneven patches of ground. Every step brought them closer to the injured horse, and with each step, her heart pounded harder. She could see the tension in the rancher's shoulders, the way he moved with a cautious but determined precision. It was clear that he was assessing every detail, calculating the safest way to approach the frightened animal. The horse trembled with each gust of wind, its injured leg making it almost impossible to stand steadily. Sarah's chest tightened with worry. She had never seen an animal so scared and vulnerable. She wanted to run forward, to try to help, but she knew the rancher was right. Getting too close too quickly could startle the horse and make the situation far more dangerous. So, she stayed back, her eyes fixed on the animal, and whispered soothing words, hoping her presence could calm it even a little. The rancher slowed his pace as he reached a safe distance from the horse. He dismounted, letting the reins fall loosely over his arm. He took a deep breath, the familiar scent of the earth and grass filling his lungs, grounding him. This was not the first time he had dealt with difficult situations involving animals, but each one was unique. Each one required patience and respect. He could feel the horse's fear radiating outward, could sense its hesitation and pain. He knew that one wrong move could send it tumbling down the cliff. Sarah watched him kneel a few feet away from the animal, speaking in soft, low tones. His words were gentle, almost like a lullaby, carrying calm and reassurance. She could see the horse's ears flicker as it tried to understand, trying to decide whether it could trust him. Sarah realized in that moment how delicate the balance was. It wasn't just strength that would save this horse. It was patience, understanding, and a careful, deliberate approach. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The rancher moved closer slowly, each step measured. He crouched, keeping his movements low and non-threatening. His hand reached out, not to grab, but to let the horse feel his presence. Sarah could barely breathe as she watched the tense muscles of the animal's body slowly relax. Just a little. In response to the rancher's calm demeanor. "Almost there," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. His voice carried a quiet confidence, the kind that could calm both animals and humans alike. Sarah felt a wave of hope. If anyone could handle this, it was him. The horse's eyes darted nervously to the edge of the cliff. Its breathing was heavy, shallow, and uneven. The rancher noticed. Kneeling closer, and talking softly, he began to gently stroke the horse's neck, careful not to touch the injured leg. Each movement was precise, controlled, designed to build trust. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, could almost taste the fear that hung over the cliff like a heavy fog. Suddenly, the horse shivered violently, startled by a loose rock sliding down the cliffside. Sarah gasped and instinctively stepped forward. But the rancher's calm hand stopped her. "Stay back," he said firmly but kindly. "If we startle it, it could make everything worse." Sarah obeyed, biting her lip to stop herself from panicking. She watched as he slowly backed away for a moment, letting the horse adjust. Then, he tried again, this time moving more cautiously. Speaking in a softer tone, the horse's muscles gradually loosened, and it even allowed the rancher to touch its mane gently. Sarah felt a flicker of relief, her hope rising slightly, but the real challenge was still ahead. The horse could not walk safely on its own, and the cliff made any attempt to move it risky. The rancher scanned the surroundings, looking for the safest way down and up again, trying to think of a way to move the animal without causing harm. He spotted a patch of firmer ground a little lower, where the slope was less steep. He realized that if he could guide the horse there carefully, it would be much safer. The rancher grabbed a rope from his saddlebag, checking it carefully. He needed something to guide the horse, to prevent it from slipping or panicking. Sarah watched as he tied the rope securely, his hands moving with practiced precision. "I need you to stay quiet," he said gently. "The horse will listen to my voice, not ours." Sarah nodded, crouching down and keeping her voice low. She could feel her own pulse racing as she watched him prepare. He slowly extended the rope toward the horse, letting it touch the ground first so the animal could see it. Then, he took a small step closer, never rushing, always maintaining calm. The horse sniffed the rope, hesitated, then slowly allowed the rancher to loop it gently around its neck. "Good, good," he murmured softly, his tone filled with reassurance. Sarah's hands trembled, but she kept them folded, trying not to distract the horse. Every move was critical. One wrong step could send them both into disaster. With the rope secured, the rancher began to guide the horse down the slope, taking one careful step at a time. He leaned close, keeping his body low, letting the horse sense his balance. Sarah followed a safe distance behind, her eyes never leaving the scene. The horse moved slowly, cautiously, sometimes wobbling but never losing its footing completely. Sarah could hear the soft scraping of hooves against rock and soil, a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet evening air. The rancher kept talking softly, encouraging the horse with each movement. Sarah felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. She had never seen anyone handle an animal in such a delicate, thoughtful way. The horse seemed to sense that it was in capable hands, and slowly, its fear began to ease. Halfway down the slope, a sudden gust of wind caused the horse to stumble. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The rancher reacted instantly, using the rope and his own body to steady it. "Easy, easy," he whispered, pressing close to keep the animal from losing its balance. Sarah could see the strain on his face, the effort it took to keep both of them safe. But he did not falter. His calm determination never wavered. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the horse reached the firmer ground. It stood there, breathing heavily, but safe. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and amazement. The rancher gently patted the horse's neck, speaking words of comfort. "You're okay now," he said quietly. "Just a little more, and we'll get you back to safety." Sarah stepped closer, her own voice trembling as she whispered to the horse. She could feel the tension in its body slowly release. The rancher nodded at her, acknowledging her presence but keeping the focus on the horse. He adjusted the rope, ensuring it was secure for the journey back up the slope. The climb back was equally challenging. The rancher led the horse carefully, finding the most stable footing, moving slowly and deliberately. Sarah followed, her own steps cautious, but her eyes filled with admiration. She realized that this was more than a simple rescue. It was an act of courage, skill, and compassion. By the time they reached the top, the sky had deepened into shades of twilight, the first stars beginning to appear. The horse was safe, standing steadily thanks to the rancher's careful guidance. Sarah let out a long breath, her chest heavy with relief and gratitude. She looked at the rancher, seeing the exhaustion on his face, the dirt and sweat covering him, yet also a quiet satisfaction. You did it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "I can't believe you did it." He smiled faintly, brushing dust from his clothes. "It wasn't easy," he said quietly. "But sometimes, you have to act, even when it's risky. You never know the difference a little courage can make." Sarah nodded, feeling a deep respect for the man who had risked so much for an injured animal and a stranger's plea. In that moment, she understood that true bravery was not about grand gestures or fame. It was about quiet determination, patience, and the willingness to do what was right, no matter the cost. As the last light faded from the sky, the horse took its first unsteady steps on solid ground, guided gently by the rancher. Sarah stayed close, her heart swelling with gratitude and relief. The danger was not entirely over, but the hardest part had passed. They had made it this far, together. And in that shared struggle, a bond had formed not just between human and horse, but between two people who had come together in a moment of urgent need, guided by courage, trust, and compassion. The horse was finally on solid ground, but the rancher knew that getting it back to safety was far from over. Its leg was injured badly, and even a gentle walk could make it stumble. The cliff behind them was treacherous, and the path to the stable was long and uneven. Sarah's anxiety rose again as she watched the horse shift its weight unsteadily, trying to adjust. She could see the pain in its eyes, the way it flinched with every movement. She wanted to help, but she also knew that rushing could make things worse. The rancher knelt beside the horse, examining the leg closely. "It's worse than I thought," he muttered to himself. Sarah leaned in slightly, careful not to crowd the horse, and asked in a whisper, "What do we do now?" He looked up at her, his face calm but serious. "We have to lift it. There's no other way. Walking it back will be too dangerous." Sarah gasped. Lift it? She hadn't even imagined that. The horse was large, heavy, and struggling. It seemed impossible. But the rancher's eyes showed determination, and she knew that he had thought it through. I can't believe you're going to do that," she murmured. He gave a small, reassuring smile. "I've done this before. It's tricky, but it can be done if we're careful. Stay back and watch. Don't distract it." Sarah nodded, stepping back a few feet, holding her breath as the rancher began to gather the materials he needed. He tied ropes securely, forming a kind of harness to lift and support the horse without hurting it. Every knot was precise, every loop carefully placed. He had done this enough times to know that one mistake could hurt the horse or himself. Sarah watched in awe, unable to believe how quickly and skillfully he worked. Once the harness was ready, he approached the horse slowly, speaking in low, comforting tones. "It's okay. Calm down. You're safe," he murmured. The horse's ears twitched, and it trembled slightly. But it did not pull away. Sarah could see the trust that had begun to form between them earlier, now stronger than ever. The rancher gently guided the harness under the horse's belly, lifting carefully as he went. He adjusted it to make sure the weight would be evenly distributed, taking extra care around the injured leg. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she watched. She had never seen anyone handle an animal with such skill and patience. Each movement was deliberate, slow, and precise, and yet it seemed almost effortless in his hands. Finally, after several careful adjustments, the rancher was ready to lift the horse. He took a deep breath and began to pull slowly. Using his strength and leverage from the ropes, the horse whinnied softly, startled at the sudden shift, but the rancher's voice never wavered. "Easy, easy," he said. "We're just moving a little. That's all." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she realized what was happening. This man was about to do the unthinkable. He was lifting a full-grown, heavy horse, injured and frightened, all by himself. The horse's hooves lifted off the ground, its body trembling, but it was secure in the harness. The rancher guided it carefully, one careful step at a time, back toward the safer path that led to the ranch. Sarah followed closely, her heart in her throat. She could see every detail, the way the horse's muscles strained, the way the rancher adjusted his hold, the gentle reassurances he gave. It was a delicate balance of strength and care, and she could hardly believe it was happening right in front of her eyes. Halfway along the path, the horse shifted suddenly, sensing the uneven ground beneath. Sarah gasped, but the rancher reacted instantly, adjusting the ropes and using his body to steady it. "It's okay. You're fine," he whispered. His calm, steady presence seemed to soothe the animal, and it stopped struggling, trusting him enough to let him guide it. Sarah felt a deep sense of relief and admiration. She realized that courage was not always loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, precise, and full of care. As they continued, the rancher's focus never wavered. He had to navigate rocks, dips in the path, and narrow spots where a misstep could have been disastrous. Sarah could see the sweat on his brow, the dust clinging to his clothes, and yet he pressed on, never once showing fear or doubt. The horse's trust in him grew with every step, and Sarah could feel her own hope rising. It was almost as if the horse knew it was safe in his hands, even in this impossible situation. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the flatter ground near the ranch. The horse was still trembling, but it was safe from the cliff and uneven slopes. The rancher carefully lowered it to the ground, one slow inch at a time. Sarah exhaled in relief as the hooves touched solid earth. The horse stood, swaying slightly, but unharmed. Sarah rushed forward gently, murmuring words of praise and comfort. The rancher knelt beside the horse, patting its neck softly. "There you go. You're safe now," he said quietly. Sarah could see the exhaustion on his face, but also a quiet satisfaction. He had done something extraordinary, something most people would never attempt, and yet, he did it with calm, care, and courage. Sarah reached out, gently brushing the horse's mane. She could feel its muscles relax under her touch, could see the fear in its eyes slowly melting into trust. She looked at the rancher, her eyes full of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. I've never seen anything like this." He gave a small smile, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You don't need to thank me. The important thing is that the horse is safe. That's all that matters." Sarah nodded, understanding. But in her heart, she knew this moment would stay with her forever. She had witnessed something incredible. A man who risked everything, who acted when it seemed impossible, all for the sake of an injured animal he barely knew. She realized that true heroism could take many forms, sometimes quiet and unnoticed, sometimes brave and unthinkable, but always meaningful. As they walked the horse back toward the ranch, Sarah noticed the way it now moved more steadily, guided by the harness and the rancher's careful lead. Its breathing was calmer, its eyes less fearful. She could see the gratitude in its movements, the relief of finally being safe, and she felt a wave of emotion herself, relief, awe, and admiration all at once. The rancher glanced at her, his eyes calm but aware. "It's not over yet," he said quietly. "We still need to get it back to the stable, make sure it's comfortable, and tend to its injuries properly." Sarah nodded, ready to follow his instructions. She had learned something important from this man. Patience, courage, and care were just as important as strength. They continued slowly, step by step, toward the ranch buildings. Sarah's heart was lighter now. Though her mind remained alert, she knew the horse had a long recovery ahead, and she understood the work it would take to heal it fully. But for the first time since finding it, she felt hope not just for the horse, but for the kind of kindness and courage humans were capable of. When they finally reached the ranch yard, the horse looked around at the familiar surroundings with a mixture of curiosity and relief. It sensed that it was safe now, away from danger and in the hands of someone who truly cared. Sarah followed the rancher as he led it to a small pen, carefully placing it on soft bedding to rest. She watched as he gently checked the leg again, making sure there were no new injuries, adjusting the harness one last time. "Rest now," he said softly to the horse. "You've done well." Sarah could see the trust in the horse's eyes, the way it leaned slightly into his touch. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude. The rancher stood, brushing dust from his hands. He looked at Sarah and nodded, as if to say that their work together had reached a safe conclusion for now. Sarah's voice trembled as she said, "I can't believe you did all of this, for a horse and $1. He gave a faint, modest smile. "Sometimes, it's not about the money," he said. "It's about doing the right thing. That's all that matters." Sarah felt a rush of admiration. She had witnessed something rare, a combination of bravery, compassion, and skill that had saved a life, and she knew that this moment would remain with her forever. A story of courage and kindness that could inspire anyone who heard it. As the sun dipped fully below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ranch, the horse settled into the soft bedding, finally at peace. Sarah stayed close, watching, while the rancher tended to it, ensuring it was safe and comfortable. In the quiet of the evening, she realized that the world was full of unexpected heroes, people who could rise to the challenge when it mattered most, who could do the unthinkable when it was needed most. And in that moment, she silently thanked the rancher for showing her what true courage looked like, not in words, but in actions. The ranch was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of early evening. The wind had calmed, and the first stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky. Sarah sat on the edge of the stable, her hands clasped together, watching the horse as it rested on the soft bedding. Its breathing had evened out, and it occasionally flicked its ears or shifted slightly, testing the comfort of its temporary home. It was a small but meaningful sign that the worst was over, that the animal could finally relax and begin to recover. The rancher, Mr. Thompson, stood nearby, brushing dust and sweat from his clothes. He looked tired, more so than Sarah had ever seen him. Yet there was a calm satisfaction in his eyes. He had done what most people would have thought impossible. And the relief of seeing the horse safe filled him quietly. He glanced over at Sarah, who had tears in her eyes, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and admiration. "You did an amazing thing," Sarah said softly, her voice breaking slightly. I don't know how to thank you. You saved its life." Mr. Thompson shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "I just did what had to be done. The important thing is that the horse is okay now." Sarah looked at him, feeling a deep respect for this man she had just met. In the hours they had spent together, she had witnessed bravery, patience, and compassion in a way she had never imagined. He had risked himself to save a stranger's horse for the mere price of $1. Yet his actions spoke far louder than money ever could. She realized that some acts of kindness and courage didn't need recognition, they were their own reward. The horse stirred slightly, lifting its head to look at them. Its eyes were soft now, no longer wide with fear, and it gave a small nicker, as if acknowledging the safety it had been brought into. Sarah smiled, moving closer to gently stroke its mane. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, Finally, you're safe. The rancher moved quietly to the other side, checking the horse's leg and ensuring that it was stable. He worked with calm precision, wrapping it gently and making sure there was no strain on the injured area. Sarah noticed the way he handled the animal, every movement careful and deliberate, and she realized that this was a man whose life had been built around understanding and caring for animals. It wasn't just skill, it was instinct, compassion, and patience, all rolled into one. As they worked, Sarah asked quietly, Have you ever done anything like this before?" Mr. Thompson looked up, a faint smile on his face. "A few times," he admitted. "But nothing quite like this. Every situation is different. Every animal reacts differently. You just have to pay attention and act carefully. And sometimes, you have to do the unthinkable to help someone or something in need." Sarah nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. She realized that true courage was often quiet, patient, and thoughtful. It wasn't about daring feats for glory or recognition. It was about choosing to act when others might hesitate. Trusting your skill, your heart, and your instincts. And she had witnessed that firsthand tonight. Hours passed as the horse rested, its breathing steady, its body slowly relaxing into the soft bedding. The rancher made a small pile of hay and water near its head, ensuring that it could eat and drink without strain. Sarah helped, feeling useful in a way that gave her comfort. She realized that she had been a witness to something extraordinary. And even though she hadn't performed the rescue herself, her presence, care, and encouragement had mattered. Finally, Mr. Thompson leaned against the stable wall, letting out a long breath. "It's done for now," he said quietly. "The horse is safe. And that's what matters." Sarah looked at him, a wave of gratitude washing over her. "I will never forget this," she said softly. "Not just what you did, but how you did it. With care, patience, and courage. You've taught me something I'll carry with me forever." He shrugged modestly, as if it were no big deal. But Sarah could see the quiet pride in his eyes. He had faced a difficult situation and acted when it mattered most. And while he might not seek recognition, his actions had left a lasting impression, not just on Sarah, but on the horse whose life he had saved. The night grew darker, and the temperature dropped slightly. The rancher suggested that Sarah rest for a while, and she gratefully accepted, sitting on a nearby bench as he continued to check on the horse. The quiet of the ranch, broken only by the soft sounds of the animals and the gentle rustle of the wind, was calming. Sarah felt her own tension begin to fade. What had started as panic, fear, and desperation had transformed into relief, gratitude, and admiration. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the long walk, the worry for the horse, the uncertainty of finding someone willing to help. And now, after hours of effort and bravery, the danger was behind them. The horse was safe, and Sarah knew that it had a chance to heal fully. But more than that, she knew she had witnessed something rare, a quiet heroism, an unselfish act that went far beyond expectation. The rancher finally sat down beside her, brushing dust from his clothes. "You should get some rest," he said kindly. "It's been a long day for all of us, including you." Sarah nodded, feeling exhausted but fulfilled. She looked back at the horse one last time for the evening, noticing how it had settled. Its body finally relaxed. "Good night," she whispered softly. "You're safe now. Everything's going to be okay." As she closed her eyes for a brief rest, she reflected on what she had learned. True courage wasn't always dramatic. True heroism wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about making the choice to act when it mattered most, even when it seemed impossible. And she had seen that in a man who had risked himself to save a stranger's horse, guided by nothing but instinct, experience, and a kind heart. Hours later, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the ranch stirred with life. Birds chirped softly, the wind rustled the grass, and the world seemed calm and renewed. The horse had rested through the night, and its breathing was steady. It shifted slightly, Rising on unsteady legs but remaining calm under the rancher's watchful eyes, Sarah stood, stretching lightly, feeling the warmth of gratitude and admiration in her chest. She looked at the rancher, who was checking the horse one final time before leaving it to rest fully. "I can't believe what you did," she said softly. "I mean, lifting it like that, guiding it. It was incredible. I'll never forget it." He gave her a faint, humble smile. "It's what anyone who cares would do," he said simply. "You just have to be willing to act, to think carefully, and to be patient. That's all." Sarah nodded, realizing the truth in his words. She had learned something invaluable. The quiet courage to act in difficult moments, the patience to handle delicate situations, and the compassion to put the well-being of another above fear or hesitation. She knew that these lessons would stay with her for a lifetime, shaping how she would respond to challenges in her own life. The horse, now more alert and calm, stepped lightly on the soft ground, testing its injured leg. Sarah watched, feeling a swell of hope. It would recover, slowly but surely, and she would never forget the man who had made that recovery possible. The rancher's actions had not only saved a life but had also inspired someone who had felt helpless moments ago. By the time Sarah prepared to leave the ranch, the sun was high in the sky, casting bright light over the fields and the animals. She turned to the rancher one last time, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." He nodded, tipping his hat modestly. "Take care, and remember what you've learned," he replied. "Courage, patience, and compassion. Those will carry you far." Sarah smiled, knowing he was right. She walked away from the ranch, feeling lighter, wiser, and deeply moved. She would tell this story for the rest of her life, not just about a rescued horse, but about the quiet heroism of a man who acted when it mattered most, turning a moment of fear and desperation into one of hope and courage. As she disappeared down the winding path that led away from the ranch, the horse looked after her for a brief moment, then settled again, safe and calm. The rancher returned to his daily routine, his extraordinary act quietly behind him. Yet its impact lingered not just in Sarah, but in the small, brave life that now had a chance to heal. And in that quiet ranch, under the open sky, the lessons of courage, compassion, and selfless action remained. Some acts of bravery leave no headlines, no applause, but their influence is profound. Sarah had witnessed one such act, and it would stay with her forever. A reminder that the unthinkable is often possible when one chooses to act with heart and courage.